This is Brett Weinstein.
This is Tom Luongo.
This is Bruce Party.
This is Alex Kreiner.
Hey, this is Brad Wall.
This is Dr. Pierre Corey.
Hi, this is Frank Peretti.
This is Danielle Smith.
This is James Lindsay.
This is Vance Crowe, and you're listening to the Shaun Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Tuesday. How's everybody doing today? Happy Tuesday. All right, precious metals. When we're talking precious metals, you know who I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about silver, gold, bull, where I'm sitting at today. The price of silver 1 ounce, $95.26 Canadian, all right? But don't take my word for it. If you're looking at buying, selling, or storing precious metals, you want some insights, you want to ask some questions, turn to Silver Gold Bull. Text or email Grahame. It's down in the show notes. You can also reach out to me, and I can put you in contact with him. But in fairness, silvergoldbull.ca, silvergoldbull.com. And that's where you're going to find the charts. That's where you're going to find all the offerings. And anything you buy online goes directly to wherever you're sitting at, all right? They mail it right to you. It's pretty slick. So for all your precious metal needs, think Silver Gold Bull. RecTech Power Products. For over 20 years, the boys there have been committed to excellence in the power sports industry. I actually just ran into Al, and and then I thought, I was talking to him. I'm like, well, I should just hop on the website. You know, every time I hop on their website, they got something brand new going on. They got a whole bunch of rebates happening right now. You know, if I just click through it, the latest one is $500 rebate, 2 years of coverage on snowmobiles. Once again, you go take a look at the website. There's a whole bunch there. Save up to $500 on a Can-Am. Once again, I'm just looking at these things. But the one that really caught my attention, and of course, marine, I'm going to do this. The Sea-Doo watercraft. Anybody know it? Like, there's some pretty slick looking Sea-Doos out there. Just throwing that out there. I know nobody cares about me, but it comes off-road motorcycles, golf carts, marine, snow. They've got it all. You can check them out at rectechpowerproducts.com. You can also stop in Monday through Saturday and see what they got on the floor. Tell Ryan I sent him, all right, or sent you, all right. And then when it comes to, staring at Canada, specifically Canada, you're like, what is going on? You're probably tired of high taxes, unstable government, watching your wealth erode. Well, meet Mikkel Thorup, one of the world's most sought-after expat consultants and founder of Expat Money. I got to go visit him beginning of March this year, and of course he was one of the original speakers on the Cornerstone Forum here in Lloydminster. He's trying to give you guys some information if you're looking at somewhere outside of currently where you're sitting. And why not a guy who spent 25 years living abroad? And he's going to try and help you, legally pay zero taxes, secure second residencies and passports, and build power for offshore portfolios and real estate, gold, and more. Down in the show notes, expatmoney.com/SMP is going to send you to a link. And on that link is 8 countries to escape World War III. You can sign up and get a free copy of How to Build a Sovereign Plan B Before Borders Close and Markets Panic. Okay, that's down in the show notes. PlanetCom. When you're busy growing and running a business, trying to stay on top of the ever-changing world of information tech can be overwhelming, to say the least. That is, every time I try and stare what's going on in the world, that line, trying to stay on top of anything these days is, I'm treading water at the best of times. I don't know about the rest of you. So when it comes to, a website, running a merch store, security, just making sure I don't lose my website, I turn to PlanetCom. And you can find Carl and his team, planetcom.ca. They're based out of Sherwood Park. And Carl is top-notch. His team is top-notch. If you want answers or solutions to your problems when it comes to the online world, check out PlanetCom, planetcom.ca. Now, as I sit here, I think we are 26 days away from leaving now. Man, it is coming fast. And I mean that in the best possible way. You know that little window before you go on holidays and you're like stressed because you got to get so much stuff done? I have that on steroids right now as we try and get everything, batten down the hatches, so to speak, make sure we got everything taken care of so we can take off on this crazy road trip across Canada and elsewhere. And I want to keep hammering this as we come through in the loop of Alberta, across Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and further east. I want all of you to nominate someone from your community. I know you all have different people you're probably thinking of. Oh, I wonder what they'd be like as a guest. I'm sure you can think of somebody There's been lots of nominations coming in. Will I get to them all? No, not both. We all know that's probably highly improbable. But at the same token, if I don't get nominations, I can't possibly even track down one I don't know of. So I want you to nominate somebody from your community. Looking forward to hearing about somebody interesting in your world and possibly getting them on the SMP, all right? If you're listening or watching on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, Substack, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave a review. Make sure to share with a friend. Casey, you got any thoughts before I keep going?
Yes.
Get up here then. Quick, 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 quick. Better say something.
When is your birthday?
When is my birthday?
Yeah.
May 2nd. When is your birthday?
September 27th.
Ooh. And how old do you turn on September 27th?
7.
7. Big 7 is going to be on the road. Are you excited for our road trip?
Yeah.
What are you most excited for on our road trip?
Going to Florida.
Going to Florida. There you go. Okay. Can you say, now, onto the tail of the tape?
Now on the tail of the tape.
You heard him. Today's guest is a professor of chemistry at Cornell University. I'm talking about Dave Collum. So buckle up. Here we go. Well, welcome to the Shaun Newman podcast. Today I'm joined by Dave Collum. Dave, thanks for hopping back on the show.
It's my pleasure. We've already had a fun pre-show discussion.
We certainly have. Well, it's been a bit. It's been since October, and I was saying to you before we started, I wanted you at the last 2 Cornerstones, and if I'm in my brain, if I'm thinking that highly of you, I go, I haven't talked to Dave in a bit. Should bring him back on. I mean, like 2026, Dave has been, every year I think it just can't top the year before. Like, we can't get into more silliness. Maybe it's because I'm now paying attention to the silliness. I don't know. But 2026.
I think you've been paying attention to the silliness. I've been on enough podcasts.
Well, fair enough. But I mean, like, the silliness just keeps ramping up. I mean, like, 2026. I don't like what sticks out to you in 2026. You're like, man, we gotta pay closer attention to this.
Well, some of the stuff you don't have to pay very close attention to get. Like, for example, it is my assertion, and it's been my assertion all along, that Iran would push the war to the point where the global economy was trashed. And they had to. This is just game theory, and it's game theory 101. And that is that Iran absolutely positively had to make sure that the world got punished for Israel and the United States bombing them. Because if they didn't, if they settled now before the pain arrives, which I think, whether it's going to arrive no matter what is a separate question. All right, there's people who say yes, there's people who say no. I'll just wait and see. Right, we're going to get an answer key on this one. But if Iran caved and mitigated the pain, then the next time Israel wanted to bomb Iran, no one would stop them. If we suffer. If the global economy gets pounded and the next time Israel wants to bomb Iran, the rest of the world will say, go home. We're not helping you because you fucked us up. That's what I'd do if I were Iran, right? This is not deep thinking. I also sincerely believe that, well, first of all, there's also home field advantage. Beating a country on its home turf, very difficult. We couldn't beat the Vietnamese, and they were pajamas, sandals, and running around the jungle. And we couldn't beat them. And we had, troops on the ground, and we were using all sorts of, what people don't know is we used a tremendous number of terrorist tactics against the Vietnamese. But it just strengthened their resolve. And so I think the Iranians are not going to cave. And so I think they totally control the ball. And I think the only way out of this one is for Trump to say, fucking I'm out. Now, who did that? Well, the last time I know someone did that was when 238, I think it was over 200 Marines got killed in Beirut when a bomb exploded. And Reagan, to his credit, said, fuck it, we're out of here, and pulled out. He said, this is a dangerous place. This is not where I want troops being. I think Trump would have to do the equivalent of that. And does Trump have that in him? as much as I've been pretty tolerant of the man for many, many years now, I don't think he has that in him. He might. If he can find a way to piss people off by doing it, then he does, right? That would ice the cake. But I think he does know how to get out of this one. He's in a real Chinese handcuff on this. And so if we are really heading for, not just expensive oil, but no oil for some people, there'll be chaos. Let's say South Korea can't get oil, right? There goes all the chips, right? Let's say Japan can't get oil, right? And most people are underestimating Iran because they're being fed gibberish about how Iran's some medieval society that just torments women. And I, as an assignment, a homework assignment for the listener, stop the video right now, go to YouTube and search Streets of Tehran. Just search that, Streets of Tehran. What you'll find is a bunch of videos in which the streets of Tehran make it look like a phenomenal place you want to visit. It looks fantastic. Now, as I watch it, I go, these look like Chamber of Commerce videos. But you got to remember, Iran has a 98% literacy rate, which is about 40% higher than Chicago. And so this is not a medieval society. And if they are Chamber of Commerce videos, they're videos that Iran has posted because they want to convey that's what it looks like. And if they were really medieval, they would not show women walking around looking hot with their faces uncovered. And so, not trusting it, I went looking for more videos. And I found videos from when Iran beat Morocco in soccer. These were authentic videos. This was Iran partying. And there were all these drunk Iranian chicks with face paint, hooting up and screaming and, yelling out car windows and stuff. And they did what Philadelphia would do, except they did not burn the city down, right? And so this image of Iran that the U.S. public's been sold on, I think, is wrong. That's not to say the regime's a bunch of good guys, but right now I wouldn't say our regimes are particularly good either at this point. I'm pretty down on what we're doing. I'm a Reagan Republican, so this is not, I've never voted for a Democrat, and probably never will unless they put some real loser in there as a Republican candidate. But the Democrats have zero on the bench, right? Look at the Democratic bench. It's just appallingly lacking anybody. And so I think Iran's going to hang tough until we suffer. And then they're going to get their toll booths and shit like that. And I also think, by the way, I think they have tremendous firepower. I don't think we in any way decimated. We certainly didn't decimate their regime because they have 31 districts supposedly. Now this is shit I'm getting off the internet, so you gotta say this is organic chemist getting shit off the internet. But you see what you want to see, I guess. But they separated Iran's like 31 districts, and they supposedly set it up such that they could all act autonomously. So there is no serpent head to be cut off. And if they had a nuclear site, right, with 98% literacy rate, and 40 years to ponder how to do this, I'm pretty sure it's not in a Quonset hut on the surface of the earth. It's down in some deep hole that looks something like Cheyenne Mountain. That's where you'd have it. And the rumor is that they have huge amounts of weapons in these caves. And people say, well, we bombed the caves, we've closed the hole. Well, supposedly they have bulldozers and earth-moving devices because they knew that's what would happen. And so they are fully equipped. And I just saw a video the other day that said they've dug their way out. And they can now get all their weapons back out into the public. And I think they're probably getting fed plenty of good weapons from tacit adversaries of ours like China, who are happy to see us get tangled up in this maybe a little bit. Although I'm not even sure I believe that. But I am hoping, since 9/11, we've killed probably 5 to 10 million people. I think it's a crude estimate, but I think it's over 5. Madeleine Albright admitted we killed 500,000 kids in Iraq. and justified it. The American people have been watching wars for decades on their television, turning it off, having dinner. It's like a reality TV show to them. And the only people who get killed are guys who are from some lower class in society who voluntarily joined, and so they're just not important to us average boomer. I'm being facetious here, but I'm not being facetious, right? I'm not trying to be cold. I'm trying to convey that we're not obsessing over those casualties. We call them a sort of a cost of war, cost of military conflict, cost of empire. I think we are long overdue to learn a sort of a karmic lesson that war is bad. And I don't know how it's going to get delivered. And I'm not really rooting for it, but I'm thinking we should get that message. And I don't know how we're going to get it unless it hurts. Pain is an indicator. You know, we evolved to feel pain so that if our leg's broken, we know to lay off it a bit. If we didn't have pain indicators, we'd die. And I think it's time for the pain indicators to tell us that bombing the shit out of other countries is not cost-free. Now, it's never been cost-free. Inflation, our huge deficit is hugely tied to, our huge debt is hugely tied to, and deficit is hugely tied to these wars. But the average person doesn't make that connection. So they don't sit there and go, you know, the reason my groceries are going up 10% a year, by the way, not 2%, is because we're bombing the shit out of people. That connection doesn't get made. So I'm not rooting for Iran because ostensibly we're fighting them. But a little voice in my head that says it's time to get the memo. And it's time, and by the way, what the ceasefire is supposed to be broken because Iran said stop bombing Lebanon. Is that bad? Is Iran bombing Israel because Israel's bombing Lebanon bad? Are the Iranians the bad guys on this one? I don't think so. That's a high ground stance, if you ask me. No one bombed us when we bombed Syria and when we bombed Yemen and, you know, by proxy. And we send dangerous weapons to bomb Ukraine, Russians in Ukraine, stuff like that. So I think Iran putting Lebanon on the table is humane. How's that?
Well, when you go back to Iran and you were talking about the 31 districts, you know, like in the course of interviewing, I don't know, the people I've cultivated over 1,000+ episodes now, it came out real fast. The 31 districts, the Mosaic defense has been, you know, they've been prepping, it sounded like, for some time. And in fairness to Iran, you're not the United States where you're sitting there going, nobody's going to touch us. Or in case you're sitting in Canada like me, you're like, nobody's going to touch us unless it's the Americans because that would be silly.
Right.
Now, there's different ways to touch different countries, right? Certainly, the deeper you dig into Canada, the more you realize how porous we are. Our laws allow for different countries to come in non-kinetically, let's say, to influence the way our country and different things are done here. But when you go to the far side of the world and you go to the Middle East, you know, war has been going on there for, oh yes, very real. So if you go back to your, 98% literate, you go, they've probably been thinking about this. Well, that's what the Mosaic defense sounds like to me. Mm-hmm. Sounds like, you know, this isn't this tiny little island. Take whatever island you want to picture, folks. This is a big swath of land, you know, and the other thing comes up, it isn't this flat prairie Saskatchewan. It's mountainous.
More like Afghanistan, right?
And so you go, well, it just seems like, well, what's the word that has been used on here lots? It was a risk. And now, did they understand the full risk of what they were doing? I don't know. And
So here's the problem I'm having. So
okay,
Trump is politically savvy at the caveman DNA level, right? He's very rough. He's very coarse relative to past presidents. But the woman on Shark Tank said she had never met a person who could spot your weakness and exploit it faster than Donald Trump.
okay,
And so here's the question: is there any chance when he? I think when he first bombed Iran, it was brilliant. And I'll tell you why. Simple game theory model. I think he told Iran, we're going to bomb your nuclear site, knowing that if it's a serious one, we can't touch it. It's too deep. It's a Pyrrhic victory. They say to us, we're going to bomb your irrelevant base in some faraway place that you don't care about. Get your guys out of the way. The two sides say no one dies, right? Right. No one fires back, right? Right. No casualties, right? Right. They do it. And then they both turn to Israel and say the nuclear story is off the table. Now shut the fuck up. That's brilliant to me. Now, I knew that Israel would not accept that. And that within a month, Netanyahu would be saying they're going to make another nuclear bomb, right? You know that because he's been saying that for 35 years. But then he actually bombed Iran on the argument that we knew that Israel was going to bomb Iran, and Iran would therefore attack our sites, and therefore we had to jump in early and take out their stuff. A person who's not in any way, shape, or form connected to this story, like beamed down from space, looking at the story would say, wait a minute, why wouldn't the United States bomb Israel? Right? Take out their weapons. They're about to drag us into war. Now, we know the answer, but we also could have said to Israel, don't do it. We're not going to back you if you do this. But we didn't do that either. So we bombed Iran. So is that a made up story to justify? Surely, no doubt. I'm sure we could have told Israel, don't do it. If someone had the balls to tell Israel, don't do it. Now, when Trump bombed Iran in earnest, and he started the Iranian war in earnest, I don't think there's a snowball's chance in hell that he didn't have advisors saying, this will destroy your presidency, which I believe he has done. I do not believe he can come back from this. I think his legacy is shot. Unless something wildly clever shows up, which is in which the 40 chess crowd says, see, that's what he was doing and it worked. I don't know what that would be. But if he has to scamper away from this, he promised to close the southern borders. He kind of did. He promised to get rid of the illegal immigrants, which, in my opinion, he didn't. And the reason is his method wasn't going to work. It was highly visible, but you can't use 10 ICE agents to remove one guy when there's 20 million that made it over the border, right? That's just, you're trying to, empty the Gulf of Mexico with a teaspoon at that point. So, but maybe there could have been 3D chess being played there where he's saying, alternatively, you can leave and you won't get deported to some banana republic who tortures you to death, right? So that might have been what was going on there, but that's not worked. Doge didn't work, although it looked brilliant to me. Hire a bunch of computer hackers, find where the waste is, track the money, AI track the money and shut it down. Shut down USAID, which they didn't. I don't see any savings by Doge. There's going to be people who can claim they see savings. I go, well, explain to me why our debt is growing at $2 trillion a year then. I don't see the savings. So that's disappointing. But he also was a no-war president, and he had been one, right? He really did look he was a deal maker, not a bomber. And then he bombed Iran. And I believe he has destroyed his presidency, his legacy. And someone asked about the midterms. I said, he doesn't care about the midterms. I go, why do you say that? And they go, because he wouldn't have bombed Iran if he did. I don't think the midterms even matter except to Trump. Maybe. And he bombed him anyways. And his advisors could have said, Donald, if we blow the midterms because you bomb Iran, they're going to ride your ass like a donkey for the next 2 years. If you and I think you can see this, the average Joe sitting there, watching TV, eating his popcorn, can see it. Certainly his advisors can see it. So if I'm right, they knew it. So why did he bomb Iran? I don't have a good answer. Is he compromised? I don't know. How's he compromised? I don't know. Is it Jared Kushner and his buddies? I don't know. Did they threaten to kill Barron Trump? I don't know. His Jared. You want to hear a weird theory? This is a low probability one that just kind of tickles my imagination. You look at, and Jared Kushner, the son-in-law, he's not just Jewish, which I didn't give less of a fuck about. Half of my colleagues were Jewish when I arrived here. I didn't know they were Jewish. It didn't matter to me. It was not a parameter I cared about. But he's a member of a very powerful Zionist family. So now in the modern geopolitical world, a plot line starts developing, right? His son just married Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer. And I'm looking at this, I'm going, okay, when Ivanka and Jared got married, could that have been, let's think like medieval kings now. Now I'm going to go medieval. The King of France marries his daughter to the son of the King of England to form an alliance. Could that have been an arranged marriage? Now, you go, no, of course not. Well, it turns out there's a Chinese woman, I can't remember her name, but I've got notes on it, who matchmaked. And she turns out to be, and then they started to have marital trouble. She matchmaked. Again, she's the daughter of Rupert Murdoch. I go, this world's getting pretty weird here. And then you find out, Kevin Warsh. Now, this is going to sound anti-Semitic. It's not Kevin Warsh. I think is an amazing choice for the Federal Reserve, because everyone said Trump would hire a printer. Could have been Lyle Brainerd. Could have been someone beyond imagination like Stephanie Kelton. And he appoints Kevin Warsh. If you had asked what one famous banker would you not have appointed if you wanted a printer, it would have been Kevin Warsh. Kevin Warsh has been bitching about our bad monetary policy since 2010. I've got quotes and articles and op-eds by him and stuff in which he talks about how QE was a horrible idea and how we should have let the system equilibrate. And Trump appoints him. My first conclusion is Trump didn't make the decision. My second potential conclusion is that everyone's assuming that Kevin Warsh is just like old boss, new boss, same as the old boss. I seem to be standing alone, and I've done a lot of podcasts. I've read a lot of shit looking for someone to say, Dave, you're not nuts. I seem to be standing alone thinking that Kevin Warsh was not put in there to change the direction of his stripes. That he was put in there because just like we needed Paul Volcker to have balls the size of cantaloupes, we now need Kevin Warsh to have balls the size of cantaloupes. Is he in there? We put Bernanke in there 2 years before the great financial crisis. Does it seem coincidental to you that we put a guy who supposedly is an expert on the Great Depression 2 years before the risk of another Great Depression showed up? I don't think so. They could have chosen anyone, but they picked a guy who's supposedly an expert. I hate what he says. I think he lies his ass off, but that's independent. He supposedly was an expert on the Great Depression. What's Kevin Warsh's role? And if you think his role is to look like he's been lying for 15 years, I think that's a little delusional. It might turn out to be true. And it might be that he faces a reality he can't ignore. But I think to assume that Kevin Warsh really didn't mean what he said for the last 15 years. When someone tells you they would hurt your ass if they were in charge of the system, I think you ought to believe them. And so I think Kevin Warsh might be the guy who's told you got to escort us. We've got to equilibrate the system. We got to shake the Etch-a-Sketch. We've got to get these debts out of here, And I actually, here's a prediction. I rarely make precise predictions. It's much better to make vague ones. I predict we're going to get completely fucked somewhere in the future. The precision is completely fucked. The somewhere in the future is the vague part. The SpaceX IPO might be the peak. The SpaceX, OpenAI, the how many $1 trillion? Probably $3 or $4 trillion worth of IPO are heading our way. What a lot of people don't remember because they were wearing diapers when it occurred. One of the arguments for why the dot-com bubble burst is because the lockout periods ended on a ton of these goofy companies, and the demand for the shares just didn't exist. And so there was the sell-off started. They are showing plenty of evidence that they're worried they're hyper worried that they will not be able to find the demand for trillions of dollars worth of shares that could unlock real badly. Trillions. During what could also be a period of liquidity problems. And so they're doing things like staging the lockout period, which makes sense to me. The last thing in the world you want to do is have a lockout period, which after 180 days, 1.5 trillion shares become available for sale. $1.5 trillion worth for just SpaceX. And then you got, OpenAI and the others, like Anthropic, whatever. There's a bunch of them. They're not of interest to me except for the fact that it's too much money. So I think there could be a complete inability to absorb them. That's why I think they staged the SpaceX lockout. That's why they wanted to get it into the index right away to try to get passive flows supporting the share price. Because it would be one of the largest market cap and soon to be largest float within days, one of the largest floats. And meanwhile, all the other companies that are being bid up by passive flows, they would be cannibalized by SpaceX's taking a very large percentage of those passive flows because it's market cap / market float proportional. So if all of a sudden there's a $1.5 trillion company, which becomes a $1.5 trillion market float, Philip Morris is not going to get anywhere near as much of the passive flows. This has never happened before. When these big mega companies went public, they were tiny. They were not mega companies. So the indices could just absorb them. Google was not a huge market cap compared to the S&P. So apparently they've turned them down to join the S&P. I think someone just said enough is enough. This is crap. But it supposedly is going into the Russell 2000. Holy shit, what's it going to do to the Russell 2000? The passive flows into that. SpaceX is going to take it all.
If I go back, I'm jotting notes as we go, Dave. I go back to this medieval family thing. Sorry. You said that, and then,
I love the idea. It may be stupid as shit, but I find it entertaining.
Well, no. The question is, has that thought process of once upon a time you marry your daughter, your son into a different family, and you become
allied.
Thank you. Has that idea completely disappeared? Well, I mean, for most people, they don't even, that doesn't cross their mind. That's not how I met my wife. And I'm sure that a lot of people listening, that's not how you met your spouse. But at the highest echelon,
that is exactly maybe happening.
Well, I mean,
I think Melania Trump, for example, I believe if I had to bet a paycheck, one way or the other, I would bet Melania Trump was introduced to Trump by Epstein. I don't even have a problem with that. I think Epstein did a bunch of matchmaking. He acted as eharmony.com for some people. I have a friend I think might have met his wife that way. I'm not sure. I have no evidence. I just look. I go, that's curious.
But you come back to the latest one, marrying the lawyer's daughter, correct? Son.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the son is marrying a woman who is Epstein's lawyer. Now, Epstein might have had 100 lawyers. I don't know the details of this, but I'm picking shards of it up on the fly.
Do you worry that picking up shards of it on the fly gives you? I mean, Dave, you are a guy who's
You
dug
get
into
it wrong. You get it wrong.
or skewed one way, right? Like,
absolutely.
Because the headline.
So one of the reasons I don't write a blog is because it doesn't give me enough time to ponder. It doesn't give me enough time to digest what I'm seeing if I wrote a weekly blog. One of the problems Candace Owens faced. Imagine Candace Owens is totally legit, which I actually think she is. She's also got a grifter streak in her, I think, but I think she's legit. Imagine she's Seymour Hersh good. If Seymour Hersh, in all the stories he wrote, they were really profound stories, if he talked about what he had on a daily basis, how would that have changed his impact? It would have been profound. Because you present, some story and you present sort of what you're finding, and quickly the guys you're writing about start readjusting. You're showing them your playbook on a daily basis. That's how Candace is doing it in the modern era. In the olden days, it would have been Woodward and Bernstein working the story hard and then releasing it. Most people, I don't know who now knows it, most people don't realize Woodward was not a journalist. He was naval intelligence. Deep state, deep throat was intelligence. The guys who broke into the Watergate were naval intelligence, were CIA. No one in the Watergate story was anything but deep state. So I think the theory, which is actually there's books written on at this point, that Nixon, it wasn't Nixon's scandal per se, Nixon was taken out by the deep state. I think that's a reasonable model. But if Seymour Hersh, when he wrote some story, or Woodward and Bernstein wrote it and released daily updates, the opposing team would be adjusting their game plan and throwing bullshit out there, and it would turn into chaos real quick. So that's the modern world that the daily sort of bloggers digging into shit are facing. They're having to hit a moving target.
Well, and the world has turned into chaos.
The world has turned into chaos.
Like when you,
well,
when
I worry I got it wrong, right? I worry I get shit wrong. So, but I patiently wait. Here's a funny story. The other day, there's a guy running for governor of some state, a guy named Howard Marks. I should look it up. Fine. So I keep saying this. I don't know what's governor. Howard Marks. What state is not Howard Marks? Victor Marks. Victor Marks running for governor. Colorado. I watched Candace interview Victor Marks. And I'll tell you why I was interested in it in a second. But Candace is interviewing Victor Marks. He's tied to TPUSA, which has tremendous deep state ties, in my opinion. And Candace is interviewing in a very hostile way. And Victor keeps trying to push back and this and that. But I'm listening to Victor. And I've studied trafficking and satanic cults and shit for 3 years and not written anything because it's such a mind-boggling world. It is a world of 9-foot zombies. It is just beyond. I talk about it in a podcast occasionally, but I haven't written anything. But I'm watching Victor Marks, and within 5 to 10 minutes, I go, this guy's been trafficked. This guy has had This guy is suffering dissociative identity disorder. I can see it in his mannerisms. I can see it in some of the things he says. I'm not sure I'm right, but my antenna's picking up shit. There's something wrong with Victor. He, therefore, if I'm right, he's a Manchurian candidate for governor. What caught my attention was that Victor was one of the very first people to have contact with Erica Kirk after Charlie got killed. Shows a picture of him hugging her. And since I think Erica Kirk is a deep state trafficked person, probably from childhood, that caught my eye. So I sent that video of Candace interviewing him to a person who chases these stories like there's no tomorrow and said, would you watch this interview and tell me if you think I'm right that Victor Marx has been trafficked? Because there are personality traits of trafficked people. There's some odd flatness of personality and other things, other tells, like playing poker. There are tells. I'm getting pretty good at it, actually. She said to me, she interviews survivors 3 times a week, probably. She said, I'm busy, but I'll get back to you later tonight when I get a chance to look at it. She turns out to be dating a guy who was trafficked. And I first ran into him when he was making videos wearing a latex mask and a distorted voice that looked like a sci-fi movie. And the normal person would watch the guy for 10 seconds and go, I am so out of here. But I listened to him and he was saying shit and I'm going, this is ringing familiar to me. He's trying to tell us something. So one day I reached out to him, I said, I want to chat. I never had the conversation, but he sent me his phone number and he said, yeah, I'll be happy to have a chat. And I'll drop the whole mask and the whole basis, or if we can just have a very straight chat. So the woman I reached out to first is dating this guy. She knows this guy. And he's now come out of the closet and he's now talked about his background with the military and things that happened and what he did and what his job was as a sort of a trafficked, brainwashed person. Before she can even watch the video, on Twitter, he's picked up on Victor Marx's trafficking, having been trafficked. So he picked up on it too. Now, he might have been on it for months for all I know. I was not. And so this connects Erica Kirk, who started, her life really started, the life that we can see started when she was 17. I don't know if anyone else can see earlier. I've not seen anything about her childhood, which is in itself a little interesting. But at 17, she was running an orphanage in Romania, which is said to have been involved in trafficking children, which is what happens in the Eastern Bloc countries in a very big way. And she and her orphanage got kicked out of Romania for trafficking. And then there's various people in TPUSA, and all of a sudden you start seeing military connections with the orphanage, and the puzzle pieces start self-assembling at some point. Now, there is the possibility this is just complete horseshit, and that it actually is being put out there to be assembled. I read a book called Family of Secrets about the Bush family, and there was one point where they talked about how they bury stories so deep that they're going to use years later. And that because they're buried so deep, when the reporter finally discovers them, maybe with a nudge, check into this, that sort of thing, they are so convinced that they really sell the story because it's their story, when the whole thing was planted years ago. And where might that show up? An example of that might be Trump. One of the things about Trump that Trump haters seem to ignore is there were just too many stories of Trump being the one guy who helped a person when no one else would, and getting no credit for it. A bunch of people, Dana White is a prominent example, but there are smaller examples of people who just said, yeah, Donald Trump called me one day and I'm sitting there thinking, if Donald Trump said, I'm running for the presidency someday, he'd start planting these stories. He started doing these little favors. He says, I'll use them later. And so These stories can all be plants. They can all, this is what makes it so hard. And you never get the answer key. You never get something that says, here it is, QED, you've nailed it, you've got it. You can have eyewitness testimony, doesn't matter, you don't know if they're lying. So what I do know is I've read enough of this shit to be convinced that some fraction of it is correct.
I was going to ask, is every time I talk to you, you talk about fractions of truth.
Right.
And how much of it, like, it's like, oh man, the thing that's, you stare at the United States, I guess, and you look at the CIA, specifically the CIA, you can go into as many branches of the intelligence service as you want. Mm-hmm. But you go back through the history and all the books written about it, all the different programs they had going back almost 100 years now. Maybe there's some that even go back even further than that. I'm sure I'll get a few different texts of, hey, you should look into this. But it's like, for the average everyday person, you're like, how do you wrap your head around it? Because, you go like, you bring up Victor Marx. You go, Manchurian Candidate. You start going. It's like, so how do you get to the bottom of it? Of like, like in Canada, I feel like there's parts where I'm like, I don't know. We seem like a pretty simple civilization compared to the United States. But the United States has all this intelligence apparatus working. They're the most powerful nation on the planet. They got this giant military. They can just walk in and extract people and bomb places. And are there consequences? Oh, yeah, we're seeing it financially. But like, it's not like there's active bombs being dropped on the United States right now. It's a very unique case study.
There could be, though.
In the future.
Well, there wouldn't be bombs. We opened the southern border. Our enemies sent people across the border. You talk to someone like Michael Yan, which I'm sure you have.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
There were multiple migrations coming across that southern border. One, for example, specifically was a Chinese contingent that were well-fed, well-clothed, and didn't want to talk to anybody. So these are guys who want to be in this country undetected, not have a passport, not have a visa, right, et cetera. My Uber driver couldn't speak English. He was Chinese. I'm going, who's he? And so there could easily be, there should be sleeper cells in the United States. Let me put it this way. If Iran's as dangerous as we think, then they're smart enough to shove Iranians across that border and say, if we need them, we're going to use them.
Yeah, the thing with
I've heard you can take out our entire grid by hitting 9 nodes. As few as 9 nodes would take out our grid. Would take out our internet, I think it was, but it might have been the grid. It was so long ago, I can't remember which. Something big. One of those two. I'll call it one of those two. When you say partial truths and partial facts, it's true, they're partial. What's also true is I work very hard to not let them become complete. Because it's when you really believe your bullshit that you're in trouble. And I believe part of my bullshit. But if you really believe your bullshit, I'm not mentioning any names, but there's people who really believe their bullshit and people who question everything but keep digging into the bullshit to try to figure out what's not bullshit. And I think that's a safer way to go. So,
with the 9 nodes, think about that for a second. 9 nodes, man, to shut down an entire country. Why, if you're Iran and you're like, at this point, what do you have to lose? Why wouldn't you just flip the switch and go?
Well, because Iran, to the extent that they are not a medieval country, to the extent they are not, to the extent that they're totally literate, the question is, would we do that? And I'd like to think we wouldn't, and therefore, why would they do that? So Iran, for example, I think could destroy Israel. Could destroy Israel. Israel has 7 desalination plants that provide something like 90% of their fresh water. They haven't. Why? Because that would be an epic, historically profound genocide. And to assume that they would do it just because they're Iran is the flawed thinking. They're not barbarians. they don't think like us necessarily, but they're not barbarians. Putin is not a barbarian. Many of these countries are responding to us incrementally. So when we say we're going to bomb this, Iran says, well, then we're going to bomb that. So Iran is escalating in tandem with us, trying to say, look, you want to throw a punch, you're going to get one back. And Israel doesn't want us to resolve the war because Israel wants us to destroy Iran. And you can say they don't, but I think you're either a liar or a retard. Maybe you're a lying retard. I don't know. But I think it's pretty clear that Israel would love us to destroy Iran. That is potentially in Israel's best interest.
For Iran to be destroyed?
Yeah. Well, we've destroyed all their other enemies. Right? The famous Wesley Clark on stage admission that some guy in the Pentagon told him that we're teeing up these 7 countries to be destroyed in the next 5 years. It took a lot longer. Wesley Clark was something like a 4-star general. He wasn't a piker. And he said he was told we're going to take out, and he says there's only one left now, and it's Iran. We didn't have to take out Gaddafi. We didn't have to take out Assad. We didn't have to help Saudi Arabia bomb the shit out of Yemen, Lebanon. Now, 1 million displaced Lebanese. They're squeegeeing every last Palestinian off the Gaza Strip. They're not attacking terrorists. They're literally squeegeeing the Gaza Strip clean of anyone who they don't want there. They talk about turning it into a resort. They're populating houses there with American Jews and things like that. This is this is the cruel world. Humans have been doing this since the dawn of time. And what we've shown here is that we haven't elevated above that. William the Conqueror wiped out like 300,000 people after he conquered. I mean, they don't. When Carthage was taken down, they realized that if they don't take them down to the studs, they'll be back in 50 years. So they just eradicated them.
Yeah.
Eradicated them. Well, there's no reason to think humans have changed that much. I think the greater Israel theory is probably real. And one of the things that scares me is say, well, what if Iran thinks different than us? Well, actually, there's people who claim, and I'm not qualified to know this, who claim that Israel thinks different. That they have this Messiah is coming if we get destroyed thing. And I haven't dug into it because religion to me is just so ass deep and shit I don't want to have to read about. But if that's true, if to them death is not the end, I don't want to fight anyone who thinks death is not the end. Religious wars, the only way you win a religious war is if you destroy your opponent. It's not a geography problem. It's not a resource problem. You have to vaporize your opponent. And I think that's what we're witnessing. I'm not a big fan of being part of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think me and you both agree that, I'm not really for war. Actually, I know I'm not for war. You go back to when you first talking about shutting down the strait.
Mm-hmm.
Iran, basically the option they had is global economy is trash, right? Game theory. You're talking.
Some say it won't be. Some say we'll just correct for it. So there's that. But yes, let's assume that'll put a serious bat to the global economy. Yes.
Is it Iran closing the strait, or is it the U.S. closing the strait?
Well, there is the 3D chess model that says it's the U.S., but I think the U.S. is responding to Iran closing the strait by saying, look, if you're not going to let our shit out, we're not going to let your shit out. That's how I read it. But again, this is just internet lore. And so, and people say, well, the insurance company shut down the strait because they wouldn't insure the ships.
Sure. Which is part of it, for sure.
Would you insure the ships? If you were, would you have your retirement portfolio heavily dependent on a company that insured the ships?
Certainly not at this point.
If you were a captain of one of those ships, would you be happy to jump behind the wheel and drive through the strait because you're insured? No.
The thing is, well, you don't see, I mean, there's no ships really going through it, but you don't see ships. Right. You don't see ships on fire every second day or every day.
But they're not going through it. So Iran's winning, aren't they?
I don't know. That's why I go, I don't know.
Well, they are if we are marching towards a calamity. Time is Iran's best friend. The longer Iran can just sit there and thumb their nose at us and say, look, talk all you want, but right now you can't bring your ships through the strait. Then
no ships going through the strait. Who does that hurt the most?
In the end, it helps Iran the most because I really believe that Iran's number one goal is they have to survive this. So while destroying the world's economy, so that Israel won't be able to come back and do it again. Because if they fold now, Israel will sign some peace deal. And then they'll make up some reason to bomb the shit out of them again, and we'll sign off on it again. Iran wins if this is an epic catastrophe. It'll hurt them, of course. It hurt us to drop guys on Omaha Beach. But you say, in the end, this is the price we pay for some higher goal. I think Iran's higher goal is to make sure this is the last time someone tries to pull this shit off. Why is this not? This to me seems self-evident, which is a problem. I know if I was in charge of Iran, I'd just say we can't let them off the hook. I'm not Iran, so maybe they're not thinking that way, but I think. And people say, oh, Iran's suffering. I go, Americans don't have any idea what suffering is. Right? There are parts of the world, like you say, oh, the Russians are now suffering. I go, Jesus Christ. These guys know how to suffer. They've got a long history of suffering. Don't tell me you're going to cause them to quit by suffering.
Yeah, well, I agree. Like, as far as suffering goes in the West, North America, our definitions of suffering are two different things. Full
Fear
stop.
of loss of toilet paper.
Right. I mean, as funny as that is exactly what the last 5 years or 6 years, I guess, going on now.
Right.
Yes, the toilet paper crisis of 2020, right? It's
way,
laughable.
if you own a house and you have reasonable resources at your disposal, I personally find it inexcusable if you don't have a couple of 100 pounds of rice and some salt and some bouillon cubes and some jugs of water in your basement. I live on a lake, so the water is less important, but in your basement. Because it would be a shame to die after 8 weeks for a crisis that lasted 10.
Well, even when I've had Martin Armstrong on, he talks about it, right? Having 2 years worth of supplies. Right. There's certainly when I go to that, it's like anytime I've had a prepper on, they go to really simple things before they ever get to 2 years worth of food. They like the one guy, I always chuckle about it because I remember I was waiting for him to say, build a bomb shelter, Dave. That's what you need to do. He's like, you got booster cables? I'm like, booster cables? One of the military guys I talked to, make sure you always have a full tank of gas. I'm like, a full tank? That's where we're at? Yeah, you got to have the simple things first before you get to all the...
You got to have a couple guns. You're
Yes.
not going to hold off a serious band of marauders with a couple of guns. It would be a shame to be taken out by one guy. I got canceled in 2020. I slept with loaded guns. I was emotionally preparing myself to blow some bastard away. And it's not that I thought I could blow away a bunch of guys who showed up at my house with guns, but I'd hate to be taken out by one guy. So I think everyone. I read somewhere back. I think it was during Y2K, which I prepared for. Risk is not what happened; it's what could have happened. I like to say that Russian roulette is a 5-1 winner, but you're stupid to play it. And so when Y2K came, there were guys who went banana, learned how to can butter and all sorts of shit. And then there were guys who did nothing. One guy said something very wise. He said to me, don't prepare in a way where you require a disaster to be okay. Don't sell your house to buy MREs, right? And so you prep proportionately. During the COVID, as soon as the COVID story showed up, I said, holy fuck, they're going to lock down the supply chains. By like late January or February, I'm going, holy fuck, they're going to lock down. Now, I had gone through all the mental gymnastics of Y2K. I had figured out all the if A fails and B fails and C fails, this is how it goes, right? So I, before anyone was responding, was at the store making sure I had topped it off. Now, I didn't want to go back there because the Y2K kind of left me, I'm not doing that again sort of story. But I think it still left me with the belief that I should have several hundred pounds of rice, which costs what, $200? You're not going to spend $200 to ensure you can eat when your car insurance is $2,000? So everyone should have shit in their basement. By the way, the other thing it does is when you need something, you don't go to the store, you go to the basement. You go, oh, I'll get some canned pears from the basement. I don't have to go to the store to get salt because we ran out of salt, or pasta because we ran out of pasta, or chili because we ran out of chili. Because I got it in the basement. So I use a pantry model. People say, well, I got tons of food in my pantry. You watch how fast that goes if you can't go to the grocery store.
Yeah,
because
well,
you can't get gas. You can't get gas, maybe. It could be simple.
yeah.
Power outage.
Yeah, you got orders of magnitude, right? When you're talking about different things. If you come back, okay, Strait of Hormuz. I'm like drawing this out. Nobody can see what I'm drawing.
Your job is to reel me in. I'm like a fish. I keep trying to run with the line.
Okay. U.S. attacks Iran because they say
Right.
Israel was going to do it, so they're preemptive, and you try and jump through the mental hoops that they're talking about. And we sit on this side and go, they had to have known they were going to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. They had to. There's just no way they didn't know that. And if you're looking around and going all these different countries, and you go, Israel has been able to inflict their will with very little repercussion from the world standpoint of just, we're done funding you, or attacking you, or whatever. So Iran shuts it down, which actually shuts down the insurance, because the insurance companies go, well, we're not insuring it. If Iran's going to threaten, they're going to cause issues. So now Iran...
They started trash talking us, by the way. They were trash talking us. They were putting out tweets that were badgering us. Go ahead.
So then the U.S. sits at the end of the Strait of Hormuz saying, well, we're not going to allow what they allow through. Roughly a blockade of a blockade, essentially.
Right.
And then you go, okay, so who does that hurt? It doesn't hurt the U.S., at least in the short term, does it?
No, it might. How many? Yeah, there's some fairly trite, almost tropish statements like, helium. There goes MRIs, things like that. And and chip making and stuff like that. So the helium that goes through the strait, apparently 30% of the world's helium supplies goes through the state. But I think Doomberg says that can be sourced in other ways. But fertilizer. So the fertilizer problem, the question is what kind of a world supply do we have? Are there farmers now in the world who are not getting fertilizer, who can't afford the fertilizer, who are deciding not to plant? So that means the food problem will appear in 27. You starve in the spring because your winter supplies didn't last. And so the world's food production is said to be at risk. There's guys who talk famine, like Michael Yon talks famine. He thinks the whole thing is a story of famine. He's a fun guy to talk to, by the way. High energy boy. And then there's oil. California doesn't get its oil the way you would think they would, right? They should be getting it from you. Here it comes, snow Mexicans. They have no pipelines because they're too green for pipelines. They have no drilling because they're too green for drilling. So basically, California inadvertently became an Asian country. They now are getting their oil from the same source that the Asian countries that are said are going to run out. So California is going to run out by that model unless we start bringing tankers across state lines. And by the way, I'm the governor of state X. Am I sending my oil to California? Not me. Those clowns self-inflicted that puppy. Gavin Newsom can eat shit and die as far as I'm concerned. So California. Now, I never finished the thought. Iran could destroy Israel today if they wanted to. Because Israel gets something like 90% of their fresh water from 7 desalination plants. All they have to do is take out 7 plants. But they don't. Because they're not a medieval country. They know that that is a war crime, a genocide of an epic proportion. Because how many million are there in Israel? Like 7 million, something like that? 7 million people would die within a week.
But we know, I think we know, you talking Iran, talking Russia, talking any country, is it the people that are evil or is it the leadership? No, absolutely not, right? For the most part,
do we even know that the Iranian leadership is evil? I'm not even.
No,
they are different.
Different for sure.
Different.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
When you bring up California, so it's interesting. When I bring up, well, who's going to be affected by this? USA. The first country that pops up, California. You're like, yeah, they have had piss poor policies there for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So they're hurt by this. I go, that's interesting.
How many parts on a Ford F-150 can you not use and still make a Ford F-150? Probably a couple. Right? Ford F-150s are this conglomeration, probably 10,000 parts. If any of those parts become unsourceable, the ability to produce Ford F-150s might go to zero. Right?
Okay. So if the Ford F-150 just disappears off the market, is that shutting down the United States?
Well, the Ford F-150 is just a metaphor for every car in America. Because if the Ford F-150 can get parts, neither can the Grand Ams and the Camaros and the Chevettes and whatever cars exist. And Japan's at great risk of energy problems because they're just an island with no resources. And what do they make? Honda, Toyota, Let's go through the math here. Now they make them in the United States now, a bunch of them. But again, so that's just one industry. My wife is on some serious medications. What if she can't get them?
Well, I think for sure when you go to treatments or food, energy, right? The big, like I go F-150s don't get made. I know I know you're symbolizing a larger problem, but when you go to like medications, right? Like people will die like real fast.
By the way,
water,
there's several
food.
There's several dystopian books and movies. One is called something like The Day After or something, where an EMP takes out everything.
Yes, I've read.
And then it tracks along. Do you remember what the subplot was there? The medication subplot. The daughter was diabetic.
Yes.
That specific drug has been used in several of these, post-dystopian movies, where they're trying to find the insulin for their kid. And the daughter in that book ends up dying.
Yes, she does.
Right. And society rebuilds itself, but it's missing a daughter. And it builds itself as something that's, it reminds me of, the Star Treks. Remember the invention of warp drive by Cochrane in Star Trek?
Yes.
Remember the society? It was like this really modern hunter-gatherer community. It was very barbaric looking, except the huts weren't made of grass and sticks. They were made of space-age geodesic dome type things. But it was Joseph Tainter's book, Collapse of Complex Societies. He talks about collapse of society being a simplification. Society, here's the way I think about it as a physical scientist. Everything tries to go random, right? It takes energy to keep random. So Mother Nature creates very organized organisms and trees and stuff through sunlight as energy. We have created a society using fossil fuels. And so a building is so far from disorder, it's ridiculous. But you know that if you all of a sudden quit putting in any energy into the modern society, it would revert back to a primitive world. And so you need energy input to create order, because it's the heat, the enthalpy of fossil fuels to fight the natural entropy change that's trying to make things disordered. So a Jenga tower is built by enthalpy, very careful ordering. When it falls, it's going back to stability. Entropy took over. It's now a pile of rubble. And if you look at a building that's been abandoned, that's been shut down, very quickly becomes worthless. So it's a constant input of energy. So if you start taking away necessary parts to society, you can go downhill very quickly.
I'm trying to get the thought out. I'm not saying it right, because I guess when I circle it on the timeline, Iran is the thing that me and you sit and stare at, right? Like them going in and bombing it, physically bombing it, because it was only less than a year ago, I think now. Forgive me the exact date, where you said it was brilliant. They go in, they bomb it, they bomb a couple things, nobody dies. Everyone goes, wow, brilliant, because now they've taken the nuclear option talking point off of it.
Mm-hmm.
Then you fast forward along the timeline, though, and then you get to where they take out the Ayatollah and all hell breaks loose, right? Like that's basically on the timeline where everybody's.
I don't think taking out the Ayatollah was when the hell broke loose, but yeah.
When do you think hell broke loose?
He martyred himself.
When do you think the on the timeline?
Well, that bombing did, but it wasn't them taking out the Ayatollah. He martyred himself. He didn't have to be taken out. He could have been in a safe place. But he was 87 years old. And he said, okay, I'm taking one for the team here, I think. He might have even had cancer or something. I mean, he said, this I will do more good by dying today. And so, but I think turning it into a real war, which is what that day did, what was mystifying to me was when Iran started bombing its neighbors. And I believe there's a number of possible interpretations. One is, if they hurt us, we're going to hurt you. Please use your influence to stop this, right? That's one theory. The other theory is that if actually look at what we bombed, I don't know for sure, but I think they were US-based installations in these other countries. There's a very quirky story that I've seen very little about since I caught a glimpse of it. You can seed clouds and make it rain. It has been known for many, many decades that therefore controlling the weather, which I don't think easily generate hurricanes, but I think there are things you can do, is a potential military strategy. It is claimed, but it never went anywhere. It didn't go viral on Twitter, so I'm not sure what happened. It is claimed that after Iran countered and hit a bunch of facilities, that their long drought ended. And all of a sudden it was raining in places that hadn't seen rain for a very long time. It is possible, and I put a low probability on this one, but it's an intriguing idea, that it is possible that they were seeding clouds that were therefore not making it into Iran, so that they were suffering from a perpetual drought. Now, Iran's big, so there's a lot of problems with this story, but there were videos of Iranians dancing around with rain coming down. And the story was, finally, it's raining again. What if that were true? That's a pretty interesting story. It's a very entertaining story.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just, if I go back before Trump is elected,
Mm-hmm.
and
Which
you got
one? Which time?
the second time,
Okay.
all right? So from 2020 onwards, you had
Mm-hmm.
COVID, where the entire world lost its mind. They tried locking us down on very, very, I don't even know if I can say it, shoddy evidence, but take your wording however you like. You have the southern border crisis.
Mm-hmm.
You have, Doge exposed more of it, but certainly the mismanagement of funds, all that stuff going on. I don't know, Dave, do you believe the 2020 election was stolen?
Yes.
Okay. So you see all the track of what they're doing in order to usher in, take your next wording you want, but they're waging war against the United States in very clever ways, correct?
Right.
You have up here,
But with our guys signing off, which is one of the reasons I chased the whole trafficking pedophilia story, was because I became convinced that there was unseen gravitational forces causing guys to make incredibly stupid decisions.
which you had a comment on Kevin Morris, which I wrote down because I found it. He gets in and he faces a reality even he can't ignore.
Right.
Like, I sit here in Canada, I'm like, I'm not an American. So, like, when I stare at what Donald Trump or anything else going on in the United States, I'm always like, I don't know if I can catch up to how fast and how big and how much the CIA / any other three-letter agency is working there. But in Canada, you look at just the direction we're taking, which was climate is our ultimate threat. I mean, we were writing in every single policy, every direction was going green.
That story's dying pretty quickly, right?
I would agree, but I also look at Carney right now as the prime minister in Canada.
There's an evil motherfucker.
But he's doing things right now that has his side revolting against him, because he's undoing all the stuff we did for climate and everything else. It's very interesting to watch. The world in which had been built for a decade, maybe longer, that we're killing everybody with the climate.
Mm-hmm.
Before Iran, maybe before even Donald Trump's elected the second time. Everything up to that point is like, holy crap, look at the world. I just think back.
George
I think
Floyd.
George Floyd, I look at Nord Stream, Russia, Ukraine, everything going on was leading us into this world we couldn't escape. Now Donald Trump's in. Everybody's talking about how he pulled the wool over everyone's eyes. I'm sitting here going, he was the no war guy, and what are we in? We're in a war. We're into something, a quagmire, which the only way he gets out is by doing something we both know Donald Trump can't do, which is go, ooh, made a mistake. I'm going to just open the strait back up and step back out. But when I look at the strait and I go, who is it hurting? The state you bring up is California. We both are good. California is the state that resembles Canada the most. Take Alberta and Saskatchewan out of the picture for a second. The rest of Canada resembles, like we got all the terrible policies, all of them.
By the way, Pierre Trudeau comes out as a total pedophile in Kathy O'Brien's book. So just so you know. And I love this story, which I actually believe when I look at the pictures that Justin was Fidel Castro's son. So.
Yeah. Well, yes.
That's a funny one. I don't care. It's irrelevant, actually, but it's funny.
All these awful things are going on. Donald Trump gets in, tries doing things like Doge. I mean, shutting down the southern border, trying to get the illegal aliens out with the ICE agents and all the stuff that went on there. The no war, now we have war. Is it something where you go back to the Kevin Moore statement? He faces a reality he can't ignore. And then he drops bombs, which doesn't, I'm trying to make rational sense out of it, which Martin always says you give these people way too much credit. But
right.
But they dropped
Hanlon's razor says don't attribute to malice what can be attributed to incompetence. Right. Collum's razor is Hanlon was CIA.
And that's what a conversation with Dave Collum was like. Well, actually, Hanlon's radar with CIA. Well, fuck.
That's funny. There's a lot of assumptions there that we want to believe that might not be true. Like Donald Trump might be trying to get rid of the illegals, or it might be some invasion of our civil liberties. So here's the question that I get. I spend a lot of time wondering. Donald Trump is no longer acceptable to me, the things he's doing. I supported him. The first term, he didn't do anything that sent a red flag up. Because for one thing, he had his defense on the field the whole way with all the Russia collusion shit, which was treasonous levels of political.
He was constantly under attack.
Yeah, that was treason. There's guys who should be in prison or executed for the shit they did with the Steele dossier and crap like that. So I can't blame him for any of that. He gets blamed by the anti-COVID squad for not abandoning, for creating the vaccine. I go, he delegated a guy he thought was the right guy who turned out to be, I think, a psychopath. And his mistake was he couldn't unwind his contribution. He couldn't say, warp speed worked. It didn't work as we hoped. And there were problems. And I didn't see him coming. It would have let him off the hook with so many people who hated him for saying, he keeps saying warp speed was total success. It's like, it wasn't a total success. They came up with a vaccine, which, by the way, in my opinion, existed years before COVID showed up. The vaccine existed. COVID existed. COVID leaked. They pulled out the vaccine. They had to pretend like it was being developed. The story falls apart that the thing was all being done in real time. The COVID vaccine is in the patent literature well preceding 2020. And so warp speed was really just a cover story for the fact they already had it. The military generates these fucking bugs and the vaccines for these fucking bugs all the time. That's what their bioweapons labs are. There are 36 bioweapons labs in Ukraine that are US-based bioweapons labs. Right? So, but Trump couldn't back away from that, which is why I don't think he can back away from Iran. He just can't let it go. He can't admit the fact that he demands tremendous loyalty to a fault, such that there are no yes men. And then when someone shows up as someone who says, wait a minute, we shouldn't be doing this, he turns on them like a rabid dog. So he turned on Tucker. He turned on Megyn Kelly. He turned on Candace Owens. He turned on MTG. These were his most loyal warriors, and he turned on them. You can't demand loyalty and then give none in return. So I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if Donald Trump entered with a really sincere plan that hasn't worked. Now, with respect to this idea of war saying, holy shit, things are unwinding so fast, even I can't hold tough. When I was done talking with Tucker online, we had about an hour and a half chat. One of the interesting things is while we were having breakfast, before we had a chat, his phone message kept going off the hook. He only uses messaging. I don't think he does a lot of phone calls. He says he doesn't have a computer. He says he doesn't watch TV. I don't know how he does it with just a phone, because I hate using my phone. He was getting text messages from Massey and from Tulsi Gabbard while we were sitting at breakfast. And afterwards I said, what has Tulsi Gabbard told you? I said, is she describe a world that's way more fucked up than she realized? And he said, yes. I said, fucked up even relative to what she already knew? And he said, yes. And then I threw some bait out that was mind-boggling. And he subsequently has kind of shown his hand on this a little, but I mentioned satanic cults running the world. Dave, take it to the hoop, right? He immediately took off with it. And he outdid me. And he said, and I know these guys. I know who these people are. And for about a half an hour, we talked about it. His staff was sitting there listening. 3 times during that chat, he said to his staff, we're not recording, right? He later had people on his show talking about satanic cults and trafficking. So I said, okay, now I can say something, because I didn't tell anyone that story until after he showed his hand a little bit. But even those people, they didn't go deep. It's almost like they were just trying to sort of skim off the surface. And I know he can go deep. So I got the feeling that, like, I watched his brother throw out some bait to him twice. I want to have a chat with Buckley. I watched him throw out the bait to Tucker twice that Tucker didn't bite on. Twice Buckley made reference to what's his face with the bug eyes? Come on, the head of the FBI. I read his book. You know what I'm talking about, the Indian guy. Twice.
Cash
Patel. Twice Buckley made reference to the number 33. And twice Buckley said something, and he kept saying 33 hours till we caught the guy, 33 hours, right? And Tucker didn't bite at all. Now, I threw some bait at him, and I watched him let it go by, but you can see he let it go by. So I said, okay, he didn't look like he knew what his brother was baiting him on. And for those who don't know, even now, what I'll tell you is 33 is the magic number for the Freemasons. So 33rd degree Freemason is top dog. That's like Church of Scientology, top of the heap. And twice his brother seemed to bait him into talking about the number 33. And twice Tucker not only let it go by, but looked like he was kind of confused at what the point was. The Buckley Tucker interview is well worth watching if you haven't watched it.
I've watched it.
Right.
Well, and they talk about Obama almost in like it gives you a real insight into the Carlsons, right? Like,
yes,
they are not Shaun Newman from middle of nowhere.
Yeah, these
Alberta.
guys are connected.
They're connected.
So I'm watching them, and I am having a thought that I couldn't shake, and then I eventually found out I was correct, and that is that Buckley was adopted. I found that out later. Because I was watching him going, these guys in some sense seem like brothers, but at another level, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing the 50% genetic overlap that I would expect to see. And then I found out in the same article said that their mother left them when Tucker was 15 or something. So their lives are somewhat complicated. And I want to talk to Buckley about what childhood was like with those two sitting at the table. And I want to dig into that. I'm connected with them, but I don't know if I can get them on a podcast. That's what I don't know.
The number 33, Freemasons.
Mm-hmm.
What is your research? I'm curious. Is this a topic that's not allowed on a podcast?
Oh no, it's allowed. I don't have much to say because I don't know what to make of it, but it seems to be. I think it's an American-based thing, although I know a guy from Europe who claims to be a 32nd degree Freemason. I think he's from Europe. Walt Disney was a Freemason. He's got a 33 club inside Disney World. There's something wrong with Disney. Disney, the company, has a problem, which you can spend a lot of time trying to figure out what Disney's role in this mess is. But a 33rd degree Freemason is like being the Grand Wizard of the KKK. Now, are the Freemasons good guys or bad guys? I don't know, actually. One of the hallmarks of Freemasons, one of the things you watch where there's a tell when Freemasonry is being implied or explicit, and it's not a rare pattern, so you have to be careful about over-interpreting it, but the black and white checkerboard floor is Freemason symbolism. And I think here's what's odd is there's all these different groups like Scientology, Freemasons, satanic cults. There's a Venn diagram overlap of these various offbeat groups. CIA, MK Ultra. I think satanic cults are a doorway into the MK Ultra program. Most appalling thing about kids who are trafficked into the pedophile networks for reasons that are highly variable, some of which is just perversion, some of which is military. I've seen estimates of 75% of them come from the family. You arrest some guy, say you're going to do 20 years, alternatively give us your daughter, that sort of thing. Read the book, The Franklin Scandal. It's the most scholarly treatment of a pedophile network. It turns out that Dave, who wrote The Franklin Scandal? Nick Bryant, who I've had many conversations with.
Yeah, I've had him on. That was my first.
He's very scholarly.
Yeah, it was my first. I'd never heard of the Franklin Scandal before, right? But I mean, it predates me essentially.
Yeah, coming out of Omaha, Nebraska, but it was national. They were shipping kids around the country. One of the things you see whenever these scandals break out, whether it's the Franklin Scandal or the Finders cult, which was a cult that was discovered, I think, in Tallahassee, and then they realized that there was related groups in, I think it was Nashville, and also they realized that something very big is going on here, so they call in the feds, and the next thing you know is the feds take charge and they wrap it all up and it goes away. That happens over and over again. So it's the feds. The feds come in to clean up the riskiness of the scandal.
Yeah, run cover. Yeah. So and that's happened in the Franklin scandal too, where the Fed tried to cover it. But a couple of the survivors hung tough and would not recant their stories, and ended up at the Supreme Court of Nebraska, and they rigged the Supreme Court trial by putting a judge who couldn't adjudicate, wasn't legally allowed to adjudicate
but he did it, and they had a prosecutor who was working with the judge. It's a big fucking mess. And the guy who was tracking it down died in a fiery plane crash. I mean, there's this whole, but it's very well written. It's a very good book. Once you hit a couple of these rabbit holes, Kathy O'Brien's book, Transformation, if you've been down these rabbit holes for a while, it's an important book. If you're new to this area, I don't even recommend starting it, because you will get 20 pages in and you will find it incomprehensible. You'll say, I just don't believe this could be true. I've been on Zoom calls with Kathy, a Zoom call with Kathy. And she's been telling a consistent story for 30 years about being trafficked, and she has high level military connection. You ever heard of Michael Aquino? Google, your listeners can do it now. Google Michael Aquino, Aquino. Listeners, do the same.
Was an American political scientist, military off. Oh yeah, no, I know that. As soon as I see the
look at the images.
Yeah, I'll see the image.
As soon as you're not looking at it, Michael Aquino is simultaneously something like a colonel in the military and an openly satanic person. And you look at his picture and you go, he's more Satan than military. That guy's fucked up, right? Aquino was central to Kathy O'Brien's story, where he was one of her real tormentors, torturers, mind benders. And that was his role in the military. So she tells stories of being raped and tortured, sodomized, brainwashed, and she named names. And I don't know if you want me to name the names, but they're multiple presidents, multiple senators, multiple congressmen, multiple presidents of other countries. And if you read it, even I, after 3 years acclimating to these crazy ideas as possible, adjusting to the fact that they could be true, had my ears pinned back very hard. There's something I learned from her book that I didn't pick up from all her podcasts. If you watch her podcast, what you'll notice is she has what a lot of the survivors seem to have, in my opinion. This is not a known thing per se. It might be, but it's just my observation. They have a very flat personality. So Erica Kirk's odd emotional transitions that look like acting, that would be consistent. But you watch one like Annika Lucas, who's a famous survivor, Kathy O'Brien, Juliet Engel. There's a blandness to their personality, which is a result of them having their personality fractured into a dozen different personalities and reassembled, and then at some point getting detoxed out of this mess and sort of recovering. There's very few who recover, because a tremendous amount of work goes into reassembling those personalities and becoming a functional member of society. But Kathy, one thing she did, she seemed to play a role. I had heard years ago that there were call girls, which I think might be a euphemism for sex slave, who knew more about geopolitics because they were involved in so many different operations that they had a better overview than the people who were hiring them. I don't think the word hiring is correct. But she was an encrypted messenger. So she would be with Cheney, and he would give her a message that says, tell the president of Mexico that to do NAFTA, we're going to do A, B, C, D, and E. And she would deliver that message. And then he'd rape her and things like that. But that's a separate part of the story. The name she names, I'll give them to you. I kept track of them, all the ones I recognized, and some that I didn't, but I could tell they were prominent. I'm going to look them up. Presidents. In her talks, what's complicated about her talks is here's a person who's reassembled herself and created a life. It's possible she's been pathological lying for 30 years. I don't think so, but it's possible. but she's reassembled herself through intense therapy. And you see the flatness, and the problem is the language she talks about it has kind of a psychotherapy flavor. So if you've learned about what happened to you, you would develop the jargon of a therapist, right? And so she's talking about being this and this and this done to her like she's a psychiatrist talking about it. It's not her fault. That's how she learned about it. And she talked about Gerald Ford a lot in her podcasts. The encrypted messenger role has totally escaped me. She claims to have been raped by, let me see if I can do this from memory, Arlen Specter. Senator Robert Byrd was a totally brutal bastard. Presidents George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, George H.C. Bush, whatever, George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr. She talks about Clinton, but doesn't explicitly talk about having sex with Clinton, but does explicitly talk about having sex with Hillary. The torture's always there. Aquino, all these guys, Aquino's in there, and presidents of other countries. And the one that really sort of knocks the wind out of you is Ronald Reagan. We want to believe Ronald Reagan's a good guy, just like we would have loved to have believed that Bill Cosby was a good guy. The funny thing, her description of Reagan is odd and oddly makes sense. Reagan would talk to her like they were a team, as though she signed off on this and it's all for the good of America. Whereas the others were just sadomasochistic douchebags and really brutal to her. He'd talk to her, but then he would have sex with her in ways that don't remember the details. Cheney was a beast. Robert Byrd was a beast. They were really ruthlessly sadomasochistic with her. And there was always the threat that they would kill her. She supposedly was scheduled to be killed when she turned 30. And a CIA guy sort of retrieved her and her daughter, took them up to Alaska. Details of which are a little thin. The first 3 chapters are written by the CIA guy, what his role was. I think he fell in love with her. The daughter, as of the writing of the book, is still in custody. They snagged her and she's in some asylum somewhere. And her whole family's still in the network. Her brothers and sisters couldn't get them out. And she was put into the network by her father. In fact, once they got him to agree, they told him how they wanted him to raise her until a certain age before they sort of took possession. So it's like, you know how you do a working dog, where someone takes the puppy and their role is to treat the puppy in a certain way. They're not training them. They're just acclimating them to human society in a certain way that sets them up to become a working dog. And then they train them, and then the different working dogs have different skills. They give the blob of a lab to the PTSD guy and the real smart dog to the blind guy, that sort of thing. And that's how they do working dogs. They do that with trafficked people. And so Erica Kirk, they'd say, oh, she's hotter than a pistol. We have got to use her for that, right? There might be some guys say he's a total sociopath. This guy's a killer. That's born identity crap, right? I think Hollywood is fucked up from head to toe. I think the CIA, the intelligence, controls all the messengers. So Kathy spent a lot of time talking about the Nashville, by the way, that was where the finders were, the Nashville country music scene and how fucked up it was. And Diddy controlled the rap world. Hollywood was controlled in its own way.
Well, you find young You don't have to go down. Well, certainly you can, but you find anything attached to stardom, right?
Oh, you find trouble.
Well, you're looking at people willing to do pretty much anything to get to the next level, and then there are
And their
gatekeepers.
their parents.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Their parents are willing to turn a blind eye to get their daughter into stardom. You know, what happened to Justin Bieber and Diddy? Justin Bieber's been throwing some serious hints out there about the shit that happened to him, and Diddy didn't get convicted of that. You know why Diddy got arrested? I'm pretty sure, because I followed the case before he got arrested. He got sued by a victim, and the lawsuit was pretty explicit and pretty grisly. And there's a link. I've got a link to the lawsuit. It was like 400 pages, but there were pictures and shit. And I think they arrested Diddy because they had to send the FBI in to get the evidence out of his fucking house, because the civil suit was about to get the evidence. And they had to shut that down. So they arrested Diddy, and then what did he get charged with? He got convicted of prostitution. Now, I happened to meet up with a comedian I've done a podcast with. And there was another guy there who was a Hollywood producer of some sort, something to do with Hollywood. He said he had been to Diddy parties, and they weren't what we're told. But I don't know who he is. It's back to that. But it was interesting. So it's like we talked off screen about our mutual friend who got to know the Kirks, right? Who shall remain nameless. But it's important to hear that other side. The person says, I've been there. My cousin worked in Hollywood, and I haven't talked to him in decades, but I'm tempted to reach out to him and say, what did you see in Hollywood? But the entire Nickelodeon cast was abused and raped and pedophiled up the kazoo. And the adults in the Nickelodeon structure were all sent to prison, right? That was a big problem in Nickelodeon.
Yeah, it's funny. Not funny. I mean, none of this is funny.
Odd.
Sure. You rattle off a whole bunch of different control structures, and you go, and who is above that controlling and implementing all the control structures? It probably feeds back to a select group of individuals, you would think.
Well, so I was on my Zoom group, which I got invited to. It was a doctor Zoom group, but it had some interesting characters. One guy who showed up one day we didn't know each other. It was a self-assembled group of people interested in the COVID story. There were doctors and lawyers. Some lawyers had massive lawsuits going. I mean, these were I think it was the first day I went to the Zoom group, Bobby Kennedy was there, right? It was a serious group. One guy there was NSA, former NSA. I found out later from a book I read, all of a sudden his name shows up, and I go, holy fuck. He was a Pentagon's expert on radical terrorism, radical Islam. And as the story goes, the Pentagon ignored his warnings. He said, you have to learn about this, this, and this. And they said, fuck off. I think he left because of that. And we had in the Zoom a guy named Tony Schaffer. If you search Tony Schaffer, I think it's SCHAFER or FFER. He was a visiting guest. And he is a famous guy. There's no question. I was Googling his ass off while he was talking. And there he is with Rumsfeld and all sorts of guys. He's a colonel. But he starts right out saying, I'm actually not a colonel. They just gave me that rank. So he was a spook. And his Twitter handle is something like TS Spook. And he's very outspoken about shit. And at the very end, I said, Tony, I'm interested in the role of pedophilia and trafficking in geopolitics. By the way, that's why I went into it. No one would study this shit for fun. But I became convinced that this was controlling the political world. So I get to the end, I asked Schaffer this question. I said, I'm interested in geopolitics and trafficking effect on it. He starts talking about Epstein, and I probably should have let him go, but I kind of interrupted him and said, I'm interested in the darker stuff. And I said, let me ask you a simple question. And I knew the answer, but I said, does the Clinton Foundation traffic children? And he said, oh, absolutely. Without hesitation. And I knew it because the Clinton Foundation members had been bailed out of Haitian prisons several times for trafficking by the Clintons. So the Clinton Foundation's been trafficking Haitian kids out of that godforsaken place, and presumably other places too. So the Clintons are a crime family. I mean, I have no doubt the Clintons are a crime family. And I don't know. I haven't been pondering. My image of Bill Clinton is he actually came from the hick. He was a hick, and he came from relative poverty, I think. I think he came from a single-parent family, something like that. And then all of a sudden, life's working really well for him, which is a pretty rare moment, right? That's pretty rare you pull out of that situation. And there's a picture of him shaking President Kennedy's hand. I'm going, how does a hick from Arkansas find himself meeting President John F. Kennedy as a high school kid? Unless he's in one of these gifted student programs that basically trains them. So was Bill Clinton groomed? I don't know. It's just that I don't have any real data to support it except for the fact that he's been a criminal, best I can tell. You want to watch something entertaining as hell? It's called The Clinton Chronicles. I watched it long before any of this shit hit my radar. I watched this probably back in '94. And it's a bunch of interviews, real low budget. Looked like it was taken with a camcorder, right? Interviewing politicians in Arkansas, talking about what Clinton was doing. And they're horror stories, all the drug running through Mena, Arkansas and shit, and people getting whacked and stuff like that. They all talk about it. I go, either these guys are fake or they're lying or something, or the Clintons been running a crime syndicate in Arkansas, which I think is true. And then I think the Clintons formed an alliance. They're both sociopaths. Bill's more effective because Hillary's too transparent. And you start wondering this connectivity. You start wondering if we know that Obama came out of nowhere. His origin story is all convoluted about the whole birth certificate shit. But the bottom line is, you go from Harvard to the presidency, and there's a lot of missing territory in there, where he was resume boosting, working for not-for-profits, doing what no one knows. So he seemed to have been groomed for the presidency, but that doesn't mean groomed, right? That doesn't mean groomed from the start. There's a woman named Elizabeth Nixon so I'm on a podcast with Jim Kunstler, and Jim starts telling me about his podcast with Elizabeth Nixon the week before. And I think I'm on with him and Luongo and maybe someone else. I don't know. And he says Elizabeth Nixon, who was head of Time Magazine's European division, Life Magazine's American division at one point or another in her life, or vice versa, it's one of those two, prominent in journalism. And she starts talking about how she discovered her mother had been trafficked and brainwashed. And this is Jim telling me the story on a podcast. I said, really? And he said, yeah, her mother was in an asylum up in Canada. I said, oh, McGill University. And he goes, how'd you know that? And I go, because McGill University was a big CIA headquarters, and they used an asylum up there, and you'd go in the asylum, you'd come out 2 years later, fucked up. It was run by a guy named Ewan Cameron. And so I went back and watched Elizabeth Nixon's story, but in the middle of this podcast, she talked about how she discovered her mother had been trafficked via this asylum. And she supposedly quit her job and studied MK Ultra for 3 years, which I didn't think was even true until I realized it was an above the fold scandal in the 70s. The Church Commission, they all went through it. And I go, oh, this is real. And then they said they wrapped it up and it didn't work, and I don't believe either. Nick Bryan says, no, it's a science now, and it's still alive and well. It's doing very well. So she studied MK Ultra, and then I'd been on this story just on a hunch. I've been tracking, and I think I might have gotten a little about of Candace Owens, maybe. She started talking about Kamala Harris having all the traits of a trafficked person. Now, I always viewed Kamala Harris as a playful person. Maybe even a person who'd be fun to hang around, although she might get annoying, but more entertaining than Waltz, put it that way. More entertaining than Biden. She said she has all the traits of a trafficked person. And then I realized, her playfulness at something was her kind of jumping personalities. Maybe. That may be what Nixon's talking about. I've not talked to her directly, so I don't know. You get her on. She's on Twitter. We're connected, but I haven't asked her any questions. I've got all these connections of which I haven't. I could call in some favors, I think, and get information, but I'm still working on it. I want to form my own conclusions before people start telling me theirs. But
well, I tell you what, we had a conversation before we started about a possible podcast idea. How about I go to work on that?
okay.
Because I think, when you're putting all these slivers together, I mean, over 1,000 episodes, I assume that's kind of what I've been doing too, trying to figure out
Right.
how they all overlap and what makes sense. And one of the things I admire about Mike Ferris, you're on an awful lot, and I always enjoy when he puts you in different, and not just you, others as well, in the realms of different people and see what comes of it, because it's bringing worlds together that really, wait, that doesn't make sense, or it doesn't, because you listen to a lot of what you said, Dave, apologies, I got Mike on my head. You're like, you've had very interesting conversations with a bunch of different, very key figures that have really shaped a lot of the different things that you get to talk about, essentially.
The other thing you could do is, if you can't get the other person, is Tommy Kerrigan as a guest would be interesting. Tommy knows more about this shit than I do.
Well, it's funny you say
Here's
that.
the other astonishing thing. Go ahead, finish that thought.
Well,
What do you
Tommy's
say?
coming on in a couple days.
Okay, say hi to Tommy for me and present that idea to him. I do probably 150 of these a year, of which Mike Ferris and Tommy own some fraction of that 150. That I'm astonished at how many of the podcasters who are universally smart guys, you can't run a podcast and be dumb, how many already subscribe to these ideas at various levels, have already reached this sort of the awareness that the world is run by 9-foot zombies, right? And I'm just saying that facetiously, but some of the claims that are made are just one level back. One time I talked to a guy who does an econ podcast from years ago, probably 2 decades ago. He's big, and he's still on Twitter, but I don't see the podcast at all. And we were talking on the phone one day for about 2 hours, just talking. And he went from chatting about econ and the markets and shit, and by the end, he was talking about sitting across the table with some guy with bright red lizard eyes. And he literally was talking about, zombies, giant invisible people, walking around the earth. And I stayed in the conversation with him, but I'm going, this guy is certifiably insane. Now, here's the interesting story. There are a ton of people who claim, look, they said, you don't have to believe me, but I have seen guys with bright red lizard eyes. I've seen a bunch of guys claim that who say, look, take it for what you want. One of the things they do when they brainwash you is they use those sort of scary, they'll drop a pile of acid in your beverage. They'll juice you out of your mind. Imagine you're a 6-year-old kid You're higher than fucking acid. And then they start bringing out demonic images. People in suits that look like, Moloch and those guys. And your brain would be melted that day. You're not qualified to cope with that. As an adult, you wouldn't be qualified to cope with that. Psychedelics are used in religion because you drop mescaline in some guy's drink and then you bring forth these religious things. The guy's going to wake up the next day and say, your God's more powerful than my God, right? And so these guys who've all seen the same thing, I do not believe are seeing these creatures. What they're doing is what they're describing is a shared experience. Juliet Engel said there's people walking around like her who did not know they had been trafficked, did not know they had been through the brainwash. There's like 12 personalities and they don't know each other necessarily. You're talking to Juliet today, there could be a Jane tomorrow. And I think some of these guys walking around the subways, screaming at the world, they are throwaways. Well, here's another one. Look at the porn world. Let's pretend like we've both seen porn at one time or another. There are thousands of unimaginably hot chicks. Possibly 10,000 unimaginably hot chicks. Possibly 100. Who knows? Where did they come from? If I'm an unimaginably hot chick, I could go do porn, but I could also just go to a bar near a med school and find some guy who's going to make $500,000 a year. And life would be a lot easier. The idea that the porn stars are a bunch of crack whores dissipates pretty quickly. When you go, I would pay good money to carry that woman's groceries for her. She's hot. Kathy O'Brien was forced to do porn flicks and stuff too. When they were not, they used her all the time, just nonstop. When she wasn't busy, they were doing porn flicks and stuff. And so,
there's a dark side to the world that
it's evil.
Yeah,
it's evil. Now, the problem I have is, I know a lot of people, especially since COVID, like Naomi Wolf, who uses a language of good versus evil that she never would have used. She's a limousine liberal. And now she's married to a special forces guy, right? She's really changed. When you're using the phrase good versus evil, you are a whisker away from becoming a religious person, right? Once you define good and evil in that way, you're all of a sudden sitting there going, maybe I should go to church. Right? I'm not going to do it, but I'm not going to criticize someone who does. I don't see where going to church on Sunday morning and being told reasons why you should be a good person is such a horrible thing. The younger generation is now endorsing religion in totally unexpected ways that was not seen coming, but they lived through COVID. They lived through the chaos of the modern era, and they're going, there's got to be something else out there. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so.
Dave, appreciate you hopping on and doing this. We'll see if we can't follow it up here in the coming month, let's say, with a different conversation that can, I don't know, give not only the audience, myself, yourself, something else to think on, but we'll leave it there.
I like the threesomes, by the way. The threesomes are fun because I like the multiple angles converging.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if we can't pull that off. Dave, appreciate you hopping on.